Welcome to the Grow Renaissance podcast. Today, I am excited to have on a guest that I've gotten to know very, very well over the last 6 or so months. And today, we are going to talk specifically about going from really what I am now calling the old world, the old way of doing things, the things that most of us are used to in life and business, and moving to a new way of doing things. And today, we have Scott Byrd. Scott is with us and has an amazing background in business, traditional business, what I call TradFi world, coming into blockchain, crypto, and moving into what we're kind of defining as that new world. So, everyone, we're in for a treat today. We have had hours and hours of deep conversations in this over the last few months, and we're going to bring some of that to you today and bring what I think is actually a part of the journey that a lot of us are on right now, which is understanding what are the old ways of doing things, what are the possibilities that live out in front of us? How are we matching what we need to do with new technologies like blockchain? And those are some of the things we're going to do. So I met Scott. I was meeting with a Grow node owner in his house in Puerto Rico, and he brought in Scott as his blockchain Bitcoin expert. And we'll kind of talk on how they got there. But I met with Scott. We talked about Grow. We talked about blockchain, and it opened up a world of opportunities for all of us. So, Scott, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And I'll kind of give you a minute. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, of what I have not hit.
Well, first of all, thank you, Will, for having me. I really excited about doing this and have really enjoyed our relationship. So this is a real honor for me. So let me give you just for context, I can give you a little bit of background on myself. I really am a product of what Will just said, called the traditional finance world. So after leaving school, almost immediately, I went to work for a company called Lehman Brothers, actually Shearson Lehman. Anyway, long story short, I think a lot of people know of that world. Was very young at the time and really was following a path that almost, many people in my, way of seeing the world would follow. You go to school and then you go, if you want to, you want to make money, you go into the investment bank world. And that's exactly what I did. So as a very young person in that world, I got indoctrinated into the world of traditional finance very early. And through the first several years, I was probably just like everyone else before things started to change a little for me. And when I say when I say it started to change a little for me, I started to notice things that seemed out of alignment. Now, I will say that I had a pretty long career. I'm 56 now, but I worked in that traditional world till my 40th birthday. So I'm going to describe a little of that, and then we can get on to the fun stuff. So,
Please do.
so basically, during that traditional world, I really got to see the underbelly of what really goes on in the traditional markets. I was in the institutional world towards the latter part of my career. Well, really the last 3/4 of my career, I worked in the institutional world where I was able to see a lot of the big money moving. And also in my world, I was also involved in creating products, structured type products for clients that were designed for a certain goal or something like that. But the reason why that's important and why what I just said was important was I started to grow really weary of the industry as I began to understand that it was simply a skim industry. And what I mean by that was that my role really in many ways was to gather an asset and to custody it with the bank or the investment bank, or bring some type of asset to the bank in which we were able to create some way to skim a little bit off of that. Now, what that means is that we were not really creating much. We were really just gathering and then shifting money from one place to the other without a lot of value creation. And that was the incentive structure, was not to create value so much. The incentive structure was to move things around in order to create some type of transaction fee.
Mm-hmm.
And the at the time, and still really today, at the time, the industry really was moving towards less of a transaction type world and then more into a what is called an asset gathering world, where you would gather the asset, you would put a fee on top of it, or what I would call a skim, let's just say 1%. And then the incentive was basically for you to keep those assets there in order to extract the fee and not do anything really out of the ordinary, because your compensation and your incentive was to have a nice flowing source of income over a long period of time that was based on the growth of these assets. And so what it really incentivized, it didn't incentivize much more than gathering assets. So after a while, and I'm kind of my personality is a little bit disagreeable. So I started to look at this from more of a cynical point of view through my 30s. And then about halfway through my 30s, after doing a lot of work in the world of coaching, I actually ended up working with a lot of different coaches in that, performance coaches. I was able to really get to the truth of what I was doing. And what I was doing was basically what a lot of people are doing now, which was a sort of a subtle skim of all of my clients' assets over a long period of time, in many ways using the research of my firm to create value, so to speak. And about halfway through my 30s, I realized this isn't good. This does not align for me. And it was, for me, a real wake-up call about what I wanted to do with my life. So that's a whole nother situation. But I'm going to bring it back here to what really ended up happening was I ended up really getting super clear on what incentive mechanisms look like and where different people were incentivized and how they were incentivized. And then was it in alignment? Were the two people that were in a transaction, were they both aligned, or was one more incented to do something? It just became really fuzzy for me. Does that make sense, by the way?
It makes a ton of sense. Can I bracket one thing before we come back to incentives? Because I think it's interesting to understand the core of some pieces of where I think we are in this juncture of, as I'm describing it, the old world to the new world. You've mentioned the skimming versus creation and the movement into, okay, I don't like this, and now I'm looking at coaching and moving into that world. This philosophy or idea that when you're not creating, when you just become a taker or a skimmer, it actually creates dead weight, lack of energy, a lack of moving forward. And that when you reach that point where, we're not creating, it actually created this juncture in your life of, I have to change something. And I feel like we're at that collectively.
Yeah. That's well said. Thank you for bringing that back. It becomes an extraction job.
Yeah.
So what you're really doing is you're looking to extract versus create, right? And so in many of these, and I would posit that like the majority of businesses are like this these days. But that's a whole nother story. But thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. What ended up happening was I felt like I was kind of sucking the life out of myself and out of my clients at some level, but in many ways, you don't even know it. I mean, a lot of the products that we would create within these investment bank structures, they're perfectly legal. Everybody was doing them, but they had an enormous amount of money that was being made without even the client knowing it, to be honest. And there's no, like I said, it was perfectly in line. Everybody was doing this type of thing. But for me, it ended up having a really deleterious effect kind of on my soul to some degree. And so that's when, and I mentioned the coaching, I'd actually been hiring coaches to increase my performance at the time. So at the time, and down the road, we'll learn, I actually started a coaching consulting firm based on all of the work I was doing with the investment banks. But essentially, yes, when I started to get to the truth of the matter, it was a true wake up call, and I think that's what we're going through right now in the entire world of business and economics and everything from, politics and the Fed and all that. This is all coming to roost right now. So it's really a great time for us to have this conversation, I think. So anyway, I go through that. And just for brevity's sake, on my 40th birthday, I walked from that business. For those of you who are watching this who know the world of a Bloomberg terminal, I turned off my Bloomberg terminal and walked out into the abyss. And for a couple of years, I managed my own investments and the like, just to reacclimate acclimate to the world. And then a couple of years later, I ended up starting a coaching and consulting firm. So this is the next part of my evolution towards my involvement with growth. So what I did then was I took all of these years of coaching that I had invested in for myself personally and started a firm that was really focused on venture capital-backed firms that were going through rough periods. So basically, they had gone through all of their, however they were going to increase performance, and then when they finally had enough, they would come and look to hire me because I'm really weird. So that went really, really well. And what ended up happening was I ended up having an individual practice for a while, and then ended up structuring it into a full company with a partner. We had an incredible amount of success, and but ultimately, what happened during that all of these different clients that we would work with, I started to see even clearer how the incentive structures and even traditional companies were just not aligned with the employees and many times with the customers. So I not only from a investment bank standpoint now had that view, but then as I moved over into my coaching and consulting company, I had a whole new view, really seeing through the eyes of a CEO and how they were thinking, and the CFO and how they were thinking about the world. And so I've got this sort of stacked bit of knowledge on top of what I had in my previous life. And, it was getting clearer and clearer that, the world was going to be ripe for some type of change. So, and out of necessity, by the way, and we'll get more into that in a minute. Then what happened was something called COVID. And then, so I'm sitting there in the, it was actually in December of 2019. I had just sold my house on an island that I'd raised my kids with down off the coast of South Carolina. We had this incredible place. We sold it. And the closing was to happen on March 15th of 2020. It ends up, I believe that the lockdowns and everything were declared on like March 16th. So we literally went from this, beautiful place that we raised our kids on this island. And for an interim period, I had to move to an apartment, and we got locked down. Wow. And interestingly, the firm that I had, my coaching firm, was in the crosshairs of COVID. So what ended up happening was just several days after all of this happened, I got a call from every single client of mine that basically said, look, we're canceling all of our agreements and all of our contracts. We don't know what's going to go on. You're a big line item on my balance sheet. And so basically we experienced a complete wipe out of business within literally about 2 or 3 days. Wow. So, luckily, we were, this is, it was a big shock, but it was a shock in the moment, but I certainly understood what was going on. And, fortunate enough for us that we had created enough to where it wasn't, a massive impact, but it really did have me have to look at my entire world really quick. And so, what happened was, and I remember very, very clearly, I sat down one night and I'm like, okay, I've got to start over again. I don't have any idea what I'm going to do. And I got a glass of red wine. I sat down, and I'm not a big drinker, but for some reason that night I got a glass of red wine, and I sat down and I read, someone had sent me some article from this guy named Robert Breedlove. And it was the title of the essay was Bitcoin and the Number Zero. What I will say is, in that moment, my life changed. Everything about my life changed in that moment, in that probably 2 hour period where I sat and read this article called Bitcoin and the Number Zero. Anyone who's listening can go, just you can go Google that. It's easily findable online. And almost in that 2 hour period, the way that I see the world was drastically changed. I had known a little bit about Bitcoin and bought a little bit in 17 on a lark, in 2017 on a lark. It was no big deal. Didn't have that much money in it. But what I was facing now was, first of all, I'd sold my house. I had money there, and I had a number of different things. And I'm all of a sudden sitting here with this understanding that I've got this pile of money, and it's getting ready to get devalued in a way that I could never imagine. So essentially knowing what's going on with COVID and the way they were going to lock things down and all that, it was so clear to me that they were going to have to print an enormous amount of money for everyone to be able to survive what's going on, like literally have to give people money. And I could see that as going to be massively inflationary and really massively devaluative to my assets at the time, the cash US dollars that I possessed. So what happened was my job became, because since I knew that was going on, my job became, how do I preserve this wealth that I've created over time? And from that point, I was really before the article, I was pretty hopeless about it. I was like, holy cow, I've just lost this. I've got this. We're going to get devalued out. This is not a good situation. But after spending some time and really starting to understand Bitcoin, I had a new lease on life. Everything pretty much changed for me almost instantly, and I could see a whole nother world that I could never see before, based on this idea of, well, let's just call it Bitcoin and the incentive structures around Bitcoin. So once I went down that, by the way, do I need to fill anything in here? I know I'm kind of running through this relatively quick.
We're getting to this point of the build up to this aha moment of I'm seeing the world change. I see the incentive structures change, and just keep going, because if you're listening to this, this is the moment. This is all of the build up into,
right.
You see the experience, you see what's happened, and now coming into this aha moment. And the reason that we're doing this podcast, talking about it, anyone that's listening, is to bridge the gap to each of our aha moments of where is the world going for
Got
me?
it. Yeah.
And I think it's a weird thing. Like you've said weird and value a lot, and that's what's changing. And anything that's new, when things change and the way we see value is changing, the first thing it's like, this is weird. So I just want to throw out to the listeners, as anything that feels weird or odd, stay listening, because we've gotten to this point, and now I think we're going to start closing gaps.
Yeah. Great. Perfect. So I think that's a great way to put it, is like, it was literally an aha moment sitting on there. I remember having some conversation with my wife around, I can't believe what I just discovered. It was like a discovery. It was like, it had been there. All of it, everything was there. It was just waiting for me to discover it. And in that moment, because I have a very curious mind, and as I said, weird, a number of things. Yeah, it was. It had this feeling, this otherworldly feeling to me, that just was so different than what I had experienced before in the traditional finance world and all of my investments. By the way, I want to pause real quick and say something. I look at much of the world through an investment framework, because my world is as an investor, and I have an interest in a number of different companies. And one of the things that really hit me, in the aha moment that hit me in this discovery, was that I actually might have a way to outpace what was going to be the new cost of capital. Now, what I mean when I say the new cost of capital, when the governments print a whole bunch of money, essentially what happens is your hurdle rate and the amount of money that you need to make in order to be profitable and actually go buy goods and services that you want, it is crucial that you outrun the cost of capital. So to give you an example of something like that, if right now they're printing, let's just say, and they are right now, it's about an average of about 15% more currency a year right now. The U.S. government is printing that amount. That becomes your cost of capital. That 15%, in order for you to make money and outrun the devaluing of the currency that the government is doing, you have to make profits, like profits, above the 15% mark. And what I could see in my in all of my portfolio companies that I had, I was like, I don't know many that are going to be able to do that. I couldn't see a lot of my traditional type of companies, everything from food companies to I have a interest in a performance drink company. I have them in a lot of different sectors, but not one of them I could see that was going to actually be able to outrun this. And it was pretty terrifying because, my whole life was kind of constructed around this. So anyway, back to the aha moment. When I started to read and understand the concept behind Bitcoin at the time, I could see a future that looked like none that I could ever have imagined before. And first of all, the bare minimum of outrunning that cost of capital would be quite easy given the way I was seeing this. So that was super exciting to me, that I had it's almost like an escape hatch. There was a way to or some people put it like a life raft. And that was really, really exciting for me. And it was also really exciting because not a lot of people were talking about it. I have kind of that type of mind. I'm always kind of running against the grain. So once this sort of started to fill itself out, I got so obsessed with this one asset. I ended up spending, this isn't an exaggeration, really thousands of hours on this. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't do anything. I listened to podcast after podcast and really started to become almost like Bitcoin and see it from a spiritual place, which I know might be a little bit strange. There's another weird thing, but we won't go in there. But it really started to take me over, and ended up buying a lot of it. So that was my first foray into this. And what I also started to realize too is in that space there were people that had different opinions about Bitcoin, in a lot of different areas. But then you had Bitcoin, and then you had something called crypto, which was not Bitcoin. It was a different type of asset than Bitcoin, but it also had a lot of controversy around it because I was seeing like a lot of these people that just they were 100% Bitcoin and thought anything else in the world would be antithetical to that and what they call shit coins or scams or something like that. So that sort of piqued my interest. It's like immediately when people don't like something, I'm like, okay, I got to look at this, And having already, yeah, I don't know if you're going to say something
there.
That's
great. I just love the curiosity.
But having already, yeah. Well, and what happened was, I'd already, like I said, I'd already established a position in Bitcoin and in the sort of the lows there in 2020. So any of you guys were knowing, by the way, I'm not an OG back in 2011. I didn't buy this thing at 85 cents or anything like that. I started really accumulating around 3,500 just to give people $3,500. Did have a little bit in 2017, but that's that really wasn't material. Well, so anyway, so after that,
3,500 is an OG to most people. Everything is relative, and yeah, we all look at the OGs at $10, but 3,500 is still an OG for most people relatively.
Yeah, and I've been incredibly fortunate, and I continue to buy Bitcoin. I bought some yesterday. So, I am a full-on believer in Bitcoin, but I'm not what you would call a Bitcoin maxi, meaning it's the only asset that you should do in this whole digital asset space. Everything else is scam. I do not subscribe to that at all. And I love Bitcoin. and it is by far the majority of all the assets I own. Just to give you a little bit of a sense of my commitment to it, for the most part, I've sold down about 80% of all of my real estate portfolios. My real estate portfolio, I've liquidated and bought Bitcoin. I've liquidated other financial assets that I have in businesses. I've taken secondary offerings off of businesses in order to go buy more Bitcoin. So that gives you a sense there. But now what ended up happening after, and then I will say, I actually ended up taking off about a year, a little less than a year, to educate people on Bitcoin. So all I would do, is for you who know about Bitcoin, you're not really I'm not getting paid anything. There was no consultancy. I just loved it and wanted to help the network and help it grow. So I just would spend all day just talking to all my friends and tell them to buy Bitcoin and all that. And most didn't, but it was almost like a service to the network. And that's really, again, I attribute to the incentive mechanisms around Bitcoin. So we've got that year off, and then I started to get my interest started to peak a little bit. And when I say that, I would look at some of these other coins, and again, people were saying they hated them. They were scams, all the stuff. So immediately I have to run to that because I'm not sure. I think everybody's got their own reasonings for shitting on all these other assets. And I need to know why, and then make up my own mind about it and not listen to what everybody else is saying. So anyway, I started to venture out and learn about a concept called smart contracts. And for those of you listening here, basically a smart contract is the possibility to have a programmable asset that could do something that you want it to do when you want to do it without fail. And it's programmed, it's software. So you're not having to deal with people, keeping integrity issues or all that. The integrity is in the software. And to me, after seeing what I could see in my old investment world, my old investment bank world, this was like nirvana. This was like, holy cow. You could create a structure that's fully transparent, that gave you the ability to have something happen in the future without fail, with everybody agreed upon it, and then you could move on and go to the next thing. And to me, that was like, holy cow, that is an incredible idea. So from that point, I started to investigate different types of incentive mechanisms. Now, let me back up real quick. When I say incentive mechanisms, what I want to point to is what are the things that have me do something? What incentivizes me to do something? And so what I see back in the old traditional finance world, the incentive mechanisms typically were not aligned. It would be like, I'm going to go hire this advisor because he knows something I don't know, which is typically, in many ways, actually not even true. And then I'm going to hope that they will do their job. And if they do, I'm going to give them a little skim. I'm going to agree to that. And then, but most of the money is going to flow all the way to the top, not even to the advisor. It's going to go mainly to the shareholders and the CEO in that way. So the incentive structure is really pyramid shaped. But then when I started to look at the incentive structures around crypto assets and digital assets and blockchain assets, all of a sudden it was a horizontal type of an incentive structure where anyone's participation in the network was benefiting everyone, and everyone had that benefit. And at some level, I really understood that because that's what I did with it, taking that time off with educating people on Bitcoin. I was just simply incentivized that more people that join the network, the possibility that my asset goes higher, and we all work together. And then I realized, like, the guy in Sri Lanka who's buying Bitcoin is helping me. He's got the same incentive I do over there. And then I started to think, yeah, if a big, huge guy in Singapore, decides to take this on, his incentive is that he's just helping the network and I grow and everybody starts to grow together. So all of a sudden, a lot of what I was dealing with in the sort of the soul-sucking energy of traditional finance seemed to be, being solved for,
yes,
at some level. And so this is what really I just could at this point I just couldn't get enough. So I was fighting against him, and the listeners might know I was fighting against two different energy patterns here. One was this Bitcoin maxi energy pattern, meaning that people are saying, "No, Scott, you're wrong. It's just Bitcoin or nothing, Bitcoin or nothing." And then I come over here and you see these exciting projects and these coins that go crazy. And yeah, Bitcoin's doing X, but these are doing 1,000X what Bitcoin was doing in terms of just potential returns. So I had to go through that perturbation for a while until I finally realized there's room for both.
Yes.
There's room for both in this world. And that was when I crossed the Rubicon of understanding that we are getting ready to enter into one of the most exciting times in the most exciting time in the history of humanity. And it's right here in front of us. And so basically, through gaining more understandings of different types of incentives, we're not going to go into that deeply today because Bitcoin's incentive differently than, let's say, Ethereum or even the Grow blockchain that we'll talk a little bit about. But they all have different, and that's what I like too. They have different types of incentive mechanisms, so I can kind of choose the one that really works for me best, that aligns for me, and that I can have confidence in when I'm investing. So anyway, so that happened, and all of a sudden I'm in this space, and in many ways that's where I am right now. So to give you sort of some context on how excited I am, I had a very thriving business up until June 30th of this year, which was just a month and a half ago, where I canceled everything. I stopped my entire previous world and ended all my contracts at the end of last quarter. And now I am full-time in this space, in both the research side of the space, in the communication, the education side of the space, working with you and us working together on this incredible project called Grow United, which I hope we get into. But I would say right now, Will, that this journey that I've been on has led me to the most exciting time of my life. I mean, it's hard for me to sleep. I just cannot get enough. And then stumbling upon, just through circumstances, strange circumstances, I find myself in Puerto Rico with some friends and blah, blah, blah. And you come over, and what you presented was like, holy cow, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is something I have to explore. So almost immediately, I bought a bunch of notes or whatever, and then you and I have been going through this process. So I want to stop right there and make sure that you have any questions or I can fill stuff in. I know I went really fast.
No, that's beautiful. Thank you, Scott. The thing that I want to hit on is we've led up to this point building to understand the incentive structure that you talked about that got you here. And I want to hit that the reason that we are on this podcast talking about Grow is because you and I, Scott and Will, are community members, meaning that we run nodes that run the blockchain. That's it. That is the incentive structure. This is not Will as a founder of company XYZ that's ready to go public and you're going to help us raise a bunch of money so that I can get very, very wealthy. No, the goal is to take this technology, get people that understand what it is, what it can do, the mission where it is going, and then we all win and we truly rise together. And so the incentives for me to do this podcast, for you to do this podcast, are the same. They are the same.
That's right. Yeah. That's really well said. And thank you for filling that in, because to me, the ability to have everyone win really almost equally. Now, let me say something. I do want to preface something. I am not interested in blockchain projects that are not moving towards decentralization. That was one of the biggest things I should have talked about with regard to Bitcoin. The whole decentralized nature of Bitcoin is what absolutely captivated me, meaning you cannot call a CEO of Bitcoin in front of Congress. You can't have the CFO of Bitcoin steal a bunch of money and create a bunch of stuff. It's a network that is grown amorphously on its own through the participation of people who believe in the same idea, at some level, right?
Yep.
and they have a community, and we all collectively desire to feed that community with our life energy, right? And then in many ways we can store our financial energy in that. But that was really crucial to me, and one of the main things that really had me almost immediately see grow as something that completely aligned with me is I could see a path to decentralization. I could see what was going on. Essentially, in this type of structure, the proof of the work that the effort you put in is simply to run a node. And the node is designed, is the more nodes we get, the more decentralized we get, and the more that we're able to, over a period of time, have it be truly a community run and consensus run project. And then when you add on top of it the use cases behind it, because we have such a passion, my wife and I, my family, around the food system and everything that's going on around that, around a lot of what's going on with climate stuff. I mean, it's just important to us. So I could see immediately that if there was a mechanism to create a decentralized network where the community members can really just do the right thing, this is something I had to be a part of, no matter what. It was almost beyond. And look, you said, not building wealth. I would say that to me, it would be disingenuous that I didn't see that building wealth was a real possibility. But I really want to build it with everyone.
Yes.
Right.
And wealth
and so
is
for me, building wealth is right.
and we talked about it earlier. I just want to hit on this, that when we talk about the old way of doing things and the world that most of us come from, and that you come from at the deepest and the highest levels of that world, is when you skim and you're not actually creating, you're just trying to take from what already exists. That is where the wealth / the value actually comes from. And the incentive structure is aligned so that every single person that is putting their energy into the project is actually creating. Because the best projects, the best use cases, the best way to leverage the network, I think I have really good ideas to it. You think you have really good ideas to it. But when you bring a decentralized community that's aligned in the incentives to create, you actually find what is the best way to create value that continues to move and create value outside of just, well, I've been working here for 10 years skimming off the top, and this guy made $2 billion and I'm still here.
Yep.
That we now have a foundation.
Yeah. And that guy there, yeah.
Go.
That guy is controlling, in many ways, your future. I'll give you a quick example of this. One of my clients, it's a big firm here, big multi-billion-dollar corporations with previous one in the last year, and there was they several thousand people that worked there, but the fact and these several thousand people at some level were really counting on going public. Right, they really wanted, because that's how they would get their exit liquidity, how they would build their wealth and blah, 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 because it was a private company. So obviously the goal is to go. But what they didn't really know is in many ways, the founders didn't want to go public. But, and there was that push-pull on. These guys were already super rich. I mean, worth billions of dollars in the private market value. They didn't need to do anything. But you have all the employees over here thinking that you're on that type of path. But in actuality, it wasn't as close as they thought. Now, I'm not trying to claim anything nefarious or anything like that. But to me, it wasn't aligned. And there was outsized control by one or two people. This structure here, just like what Will said, is the growth possibility. I'm sorry, I think someone's trying to do something to me here and mess me up. The growth possibility here looks like a consensus. Now, people might say, wait a minute, do you have to get consensus on everything? Is that going to be the most efficient way to do it? Blah, 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 that type of thing. I actually think it does over a long period of time because it's a vetting process. It's a lot different than the traditional finance world. So I'm a big fan of this, and I'm a big fan of this experiment because I see that what's happened on traditional finance is literally just sucked the life out of a lot of our economy. And the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and then the extraction comes from the middle class. Here, the middle class is the same as up and down. It's to me, it's beautiful. And I'll say this again, it's in some ways it's spiritual to me. But again, we won't go there. But it has an element of alignment which I haven't seen anywhere else.
I love it.
Yeah.
And I think
Does
going
that make
forward,
sense, by the way, when I talk about that? Yeah.
yeah, it makes a ton of sense. It makes a lot of sense, and I think it's going to make sense to a lot of people. And I think it's okay to go to the spiritual side, the things that we deeply believe. And I think there's people that are listening to this that are going to say, I may not understand all of the tactical things of how this happens, but I feel something about this. And that's how it was for me. When I moved to Puerto Rico and I didn't even know it was the blockchain, one of the blockchain hubs of the world. I didn't understand it. I didn't
Mm.
understand the incentive structures the way that I do now. I didn't understand the tactical mechanisms that need to be moved to actually create those structures, which now I do. But I felt it. And I knew that the way that we were living and the way that things were going was not the way that I felt like I could create, I could provide value, and I could step into my full ability to create and provide value to the world. And so that feeling is a good thing and it's something to follow. And I think most of us are scared. If we go back to quote unquote weird, quote unquote new, different, scam, the words that we hear around things that are new and coming, which I hear all the time because as both of us do, we spend a lot of time in the blockchain community and how we're bringing that to real world
Mm-hmm.
utility. There's a lot of that aura when really it's just about, I don't fully understand it, a little bit of education, and how can it be used in the best way possible. And we even heard that in your journey from being Bitcoin into, okay, there are projects that can be used and can move. And so it's a really interesting journey.
Yeah. And if I could build a little bit more, it's in alignment with nature to me. That's what's important. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, nature has different environments. There's all different environments. I'm on top of a mountain outside of Boulder, Colorado right now. We are in this incredibly beautiful forest way up high, and it's a certain environment. And certain things grow here. The aspen trees grow here. These incredible pine trees are here. There's all this type of stuff that grows naturally in this environment. And the reason why I really love this exploration is that I see a lot of these different projects as different environments. So what I mean by that is, in each of these environments, certain things are going to grow better than in other environments. And that's what I really love about the crypto side, not the Bitcoin side, but the crypto side of this is that there's so many of these different environments where different things are going to grow through these environments. And they all have different incentive structures too. They're not all the same. And that's the beautiful thing about blockchain technology is that you don't have to have an incentive structure like Grow. You don't have to have an incentive structure like Ethereum or Solana or anything like that. With the malleability of cryptography, you're actually able to create very specific incentive structures for certain things to happen. Like the thing about with the Grow blockchain, I mean, we're actually able to go buy goods and services, meat, all the stuff that whatever, with our native tokens on here that grew from this environment of our nodes.
Yes.
So it's almost like I'm growing money to some extent in this environment of all, and as more people join our network here, and the more decentralized it gets, the more powerful it actually gets, and the more that can actually grow up through it, right? Hence the name Grow. That all just came to me right now. But that's another thing that I like because there's 20, 30,000 projects out there, and honestly, there are a lot of scams. The world has scams. I can tell you, we're not involved in one right now, in what you and I are doing, or I wouldn't be involved in it. What we have is a natural evolution. I mean, a natural gathering of people, like-minded people who want to be in our community, which is typically going to be more of like maybe a health conscious, more of an environmentally conscious type that's going to want to just be with other people like that, grow together, make money together, change the world together and grow out of this environment. And I think it's even beyond just the financial side of it, because you become part of something that's actually bigger. Now, that's not all of them. I've done a lot of work this morning. I usually will try to spend at least a little, an hour or so each day looking at some different project or something something that's come across my desk, whether I could go buy a token or go buy a node from them or not. But really, to me, if I was going to go and look for a perfect model of what I'd look for, it would be grow. Now, if is all right, I'll take a couple minutes to tell you why. I mean, this is because and by the way, anyone listening to this, what I'm doing right now is I'm serving the network. Because what serves the network are for people, like-minded people, to come and join this network. And so what I love about this is it's based on something called proof of action. Now, that's a different type of incentive mechanism. Bitcoin, you have something called proof of work, which you need to have someone to explain all that at another time, and we just don't have time today. You have something like Ethereum, which is proof of stake. You've got all these different types of incentive mechanisms in order to either earn coins or basically earn incentives, things that incentive to have you continue to add and build the network out. Where grow, to me, just feels so natural in so many different areas, and it's based on proof of action. So when you do certain things, you get rewarded for it. It's not the same way if I go over it like with Morgan Stanley or Goldman Sachs or ad accounts. It's basically, if I go and help them build their network, I don't get anything, right? I'm not incentivized. If I refer a $25 million account over to Goldman, there's nothing in it. But for here, what happens is I am truly part of, I want to do that. I want to tell my neighbor about this. I want to have my son, this is a great example. My son heard this story. I mean, he's very young. He's 24. He has no money. He went out and he worked to buy a grow node. He goes, I want to buy a grow node. And I said, well, go buy it. I'm not buying it for you. Go work to do it. And he scraped up his money because he wanted to be part of this. Him and his girlfriend, they both worked together. It was so sweet. Awesome. That's what I'm talking about. That's an energy. That's what I'm pointing to here. And you don't have that at Goldman Sachs. So that's why I say this is beyond that for me. There's a much bigger component to all of this, and I will say this too, and then I'll shut up. It changes you. I'm a transformed person because of a way of thinking about things that isn't extractive. So much of my world that I'm around, I can see as an extractive world. Here, this is a world that brings us communally together for common growth, and we can frankly all get wealthy from it. And the earlier we do it, and the earlier that we can understand that, right now, so early and grow. It's like buying Amazon at a quarter. Most of these projects are really like that. The ones now, there'll be 20 or 30. All of them won't go. I just think grow will be one of the relatively few. There won't be 20,000 of these things in a couple of years, maybe 5 years. But anyway, it'll all be based on the network. It'll all be based on the energy that we bring to it and the commitment. And gosh, I could go on and on. Bring some more stuff to me to bring it out, because for me, it's just so all-encompassingly beautiful.
I love it. Thank you, Scott. And thank you for being here. This feels like we're ending in the middle of what could be a part one of part 2, 3, or 4 to continue. And I think this is a beautiful place to bookmark this, of what we have seen today and what we've heard is the journey into this world, the journey into putting your energy into co-creation, into incentive structures that make sure that everyone that is a part of that creation process is winning together and that it's not lopsided, and from a place of truly nourishing the world in a project where that is the base goal, to not only nourish ourselves as humanity, but to ensure that the plants, the animals, the atmosphere, the soil, the things that are providing us the energy to go and create within it, is doing it in an immutable, transparent, perfect way to find what that perfect way is. And so I just really appreciate you being here. And let's give one last hurrah. Anything else that you want to leave leave our community with today?
Yeah. I will leave something. Thank you for asking. And you did not tell me to do this, and I don't say what I'm going to say right here lightly. I put an enormous amount of time into this space, and I know that there's a lot of different types of actors that are out there. The allure of the big money is really attractive, and it can happen if depending. It's not what's interesting to me. What's interesting to me is aligning with folks like Will Taylor. And even though right now we're not fully decentralized at this, I know that you have a commitment to decentralizing this network. So what I want to say is, anyone listen to this, you don't have to do Grow. There's a lot of other great projects out there. But what I would say is get really clear on the people that you're dealing with, because this world can get really squirrely quick, and you can lose a lot of money too if you're not in alignment. So my journey with you, with all of the Grow team, has been perfectly in alignment for what I look for a good investment. This is not, I'm not trying to sell anybody on this, although you probably should take a look at this. But my point is the people are important. They're very important in this, and I've had a lot of conversations, and I would not have put my money in this if I didn't really wasn't very impressed with what you've built here and what you're committed to. So that would be my message. Do the work. Don't just go buy something just because everybody else is buying it. Get committed, because otherwise you're going to get shaken out. But yeah, I look forward to it. We'll definitely need to do part 2, 3, 4, whatever you'd like. Well, I'm always willing to serve you and the network. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. And I add to it, if you've listened to this point, you know the caliber of person that Scott is. And I appreciate the things that you said about us, about the Grow community, about the Grow team and what we've built. And if you feel anything to that, to be a part of this, there are many, many ways to be a part of what we are doing here in the Grow community, with the blockchain, with running the blockchain, with being involved in projects. And so that's the goal, because if we can create more people and more energy that go into this, that's what moves it. And so it's the foundation is here, and we're going. So thank you everyone for listening today. There will be more parts from Scott, but we appreciate him being here. Make sure that you like, share, subscribe anywhere that you listen to this. That is what moves the network right now. Is if every person that listens to this sends it to 5 people, that is what will move the community for us at the moment. So thank you for listening to another episode of the Grow Renaissance podcast.